It all started on the 14th night of March, the night my parents' 20th wedding anniversary. It was a wonderful sunny day, if memory serves, surprisingly warm for being the beginning of spring. The beautiful weather was perfect for the atmosphere of the day. Being married for 20 years is obviously a momentous occasion, so my parents had booked a table at our favorite Italian restaurant. Of course, this was a formal occasion, so I had my best suit on. It was 5:33 and I was just straightening my tie when my phone went off. I had received a message. That's strange, I thought. That never happens. I checked the message and it was from my mom. It was quite a jumble of numbers and letters, but through the vocabulary stew I could make out the legible phrase. Please help me. It should go without saying that this worried me greatly, so I immediately replied, Are you okay? Just as instantly as I got another text which read, Oops, pocket text. I sighed with all the relief I had and continued to prepare myself. A few minutes later I received yet another message, and this time it was from my dad. So I checked the text, and once again it was a massive mixture of letters and numbers with the phrase, Please help me, concealed within. Creepy as this was, my dad was always a joker, so I presumed he was just joking around, until I was sent another text saying, Oops, pocket text. Now this sparked panic, pure, unmistakable panic. Exactly half a minute passed when I received the exact same message from my sister. This could not be coincidental. It just couldn't. In a state of sheer anxiety, I started to run to the restaurant. I made it about a quarter of the way before I was stopped by a police officer. Main road's closed, he said. Huge car crash. This was the exact moment I realized just what had happened. I demanded to see the wreckage as a request. I'm surprised I was allowed. When I got there, it wasn't the remnants of the car that caught my eye, nor the flames billowing from the destroyed vehicle. No, I was horrified to see the lifeless corpses of my mother, father, and sister. I asked for the estimated time of death, and all three of them were killed instantly by the collision at 5:32. I handed him the envelope as soon as I closed the passenger door. Count it, it's all there. He raises an eyebrow. Well, good morning to you too. The stack of bills is counted in no time, which doesn't surprise me. He's probably done this several times before. A slight nod of his head indicates it's the correct amount. I've got to ask you, are you 100% sure you want to do this? Yes, my mind is made up. I can't live with her anymore. She's cold, demanding, and controlling. But I can't leave her, either, because I'll lose everything if I do, and I'd rather burn in hell. He raised a hand. All right, I gotcha. I just want to make sure, because once it's done, it can't be undone. I'm aware of this. And you can't do this yourself? I told you I've tried, but keep losing my nerve. He shrugs. Okay then, so let's go through this one more time. Dinner's at 6 sharp. I ring the doorbell at 6:05. Then one clean shot to the head, execution style. Yes, please, quick and hopefully painless. Thy will be done, he says, and we shake hands. My wife and I are eating dinner, accompanied by our usual silent tensions. Eyes on our plates instead of on each other. I'm surprisingly calm, not even flinching when the doorbell rings. As she pushes back her chair to get up, I stop her with an outstretched palm. It's okay. A quick glance at my wristwatch tells me that it's 6:05 p.m. I'll get it. This actually happened to me a few years back when I was attending the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. My sophomore year, I roomed with a girl named Kara. She was a jazz vocalist, but her main interest was opera. We had a small room on the 6th floor of a dormitory called Juniper Hall. The walls were thin, and her last night singing and voice practices would keep me up late. After a month or so of lost sleep, I convinced her to move her last night practices to the music studios in the Merriman Theater building a block away. Around 8 p.m. one evening, Kara announced that she would be practicing late for an upcoming recital and probably wouldn't be home until around midnight. Great, I thought. That means I can go to bed early. I was beat. I had a horrible day in acting studio and I was ready to pass out as soon as I had dinner. She said goodnight and left, coffee and sheet music in hand. I made some grilled cheese and soup, gobbled it down, and immediately began to prepare for bed. By the time I got out of the shower, my eyelids were so heavy I could hardly brush my teeth. I pulled on my PJs and crawled into the top bunk of our bunk bed. I was out as soon as I hit the pillow. I should take a second to describe the layout of our apartment. When entering the apartment, the bedroom was through a door immediately to the left. Our bathroom was inside the bedroom, just past the bunk beds. Anyway, I woke up to the sound of the apartment door closing. I opened my eyes and groggily checked my phone. Midnight, right on the dot. I rolled back over and closed my eyes. I heard Kara enter the room and stop in front of the bunk bed. Checking to see if I'm actually asleep, I thought. She flopped down on the bed below me, which was strange, as she was a stickler for brushing her teeth and washing up before bed. Then again, exams were just around the corner and we were all exhausted. The mattress below me creaked and then it was silent. I couldn't even hear her breathing. I started to drift off again. I was just on the edge of deep sleep when I was startled awake by a noise. A key in the lock. The door was opening. And Kara entering our apartment, humming an opera tune. All of a sudden, the mattress below me creaked. They've done it again. Those damn kids have trampled my azaleas, just like they trampled my lavender yesterday, and my peonies the other day before that. I know how they get into my garden. The fence is high, but there's a notch on one of the panels that they use as a foothold. I've seen them from my kitchen, watch them as they swing their skinny legs over the top of the fence and drop down into the far corner, right behind my marigolds. They stomp their way through my flowers to their missing ball, destroying the delicate little things without a second thought. They even scuff up the sides of my shed as they scramble their way out again. I hate who they've made me become. Some crotchety old man standing on his porch waving his cane. Hey, you kids, get off my lawn. The thing is, if they asked me, I would get their ball for them. I don't have a problem with them playing their game. Hell, when I was a kid, I went through my fair share of lost balls and frisbees and even the odd bat or two. I know what it's like to be their age, and I know that they can't help it when they lose their ball. But I also know that trespassing is wrong. My garden is my space, my property, and they have no right to be there. If they would just listen to me, this wouldn't be an issue. But no. Every time they kick their ball a little too hard and it goes sailing over my fence, they're chasing straight after it before I can stop them. None of them pay attention to me when I tell them, no, goddammit, don't go into my garden. Since the kids wouldn't listen to me, I went and talked to their mothers. I was calm, collected, and explained that I didn't want the kids to go romping around through my yard at any time they felt like it. I was reasonable, but every single mother told me that the same thing. Boys will be boys. Well, if their parents aren't prepared to do anything about it, then I will. The next time one of those kids comes climbing over my fence, There'll be something waiting for them. I set up the bear trap this morning. Its sharp steel jaws nestled right behind my marigolds. Those kids are going to learn a lesson about respecting other people's property. I can hear them playing on the streets outside right now. From their shouts, it sounds like baseball. Good. Not too long to wait. The bank I work at was robbed again last night. It's been hit 3 times this month, and we're sure it's the same person. Every single time the guy has vanished without a trace. It's almost as if he completely disappears. There should be no way he should be able to get away with it so quickly without leaving any evidence. Last night when the robbery happened, I looked him in the eye for the first time. "Why do you keep doing this?" I asked him, searching his dark eyes for an answer. He stared at me coldly from behind a ski mask and replied, "A man's got to eat." I thought about it long and hard, but I've made up my mind. I'm never going back to work at that blood bank again. When I was just a little boy, I had an imaginary friend. At least I thought he was an imaginary friend. Today, I'm not so sure. I would see him from time to time around my house. He was a man and he lurked in the shadows. He was completely black from head to toe and his skin was charred and pockmarked, like a burnt match. I couldn't make out his face or any other features. All I could see were his red eyes. He had the most terrifying red eyes. Even now, when I think of them, it gives me the chills. He appeared at random and without any warning. I would be playing with my toys and all of a sudden, he would be there. He never made a sound. He never said a word. He never did anything except stand there, staring at me and smiling. Then he would vanish as quietly and as suddenly as he had come. As time went by, I got accustomed to his presence. It got to the point where he would appear and I would just glance at him, then go back to playing with my toys. I could always feel his eyes on me as he was standing ever so close or ever so far away. My family knew about him, but they never saw him themselves. My mother and father thought it was cute that I had an imaginary friend, but when I described him to them, they got a little creeped out. My sister was the only one who believed he was real, and she said she was scared of him. One time I had just finished going to the toilet and was washing my hands. I was standing on a little stool so I could reach the sink. All of a sudden I saw the man out of the corner of my eye. He was walking up the stairs. I called my sister and told her that the man was here. She came running over, but just when I was about to point at the man, he walked backwards down the stairs until he was out of sight. When she left, he came creeping back up the stairs. I gave up trying to show him to people because he clearly did not want to be seen. Eventually, my parents moved. I remember seeing the man with the red eyes watching as the moving van pulled away. He didn't follow us, and I didn't see him again after that. I dismissed him as a figment of my childish imagination. Years passed, and I forgot all about him. Then, one night when I was 16 years old, I was walking upstairs to my bedroom. It was after midnight. As I was walking down the hallway, something emerged from one of the other bedrooms. It stepped out into the light, and I realized, to my horror, that it was the man with the red eyes. I stopped in my tracks and froze. My heart was in my throat. He just stood there staring at me. The red eyes burned bright as he flashed me a malicious smile. Then, still staring at me, he slowly walked across the hallway and into my bedroom. If this was a movie, perhaps I would have chased him down and forced him to tell me who or what he was. Perhaps it would have ended in me fighting him to the death. But this wasn't a movie. It was real life, and I did neither of those things. I simply turned around, back down the stairs, and fled from my house. I sat on the curb outside, shivering and shaking, until dawn arrived. I haven't seen him again since then. Gloria broke it off with me today. She said something about how we just weren't meant to be and that we could just be friends. They always say that. At first, I was hurt. Then I was angry. How could she do this to me after everything I've done for her? Not meant to be. I started to get really mad. But then, I remembered the advice my father gave me long ago after my first big heartbreak. Son, sometimes a woman just doesn't want to give you her heart, and that's okay, because you can always cut it out of her chest. My daughter woke me up around 11:50 last night. My wife and I had picked her up from her friend Sally's birthday party, brought her home, and put her to bed. My wife went into the bedroom to read while I fell asleep watching the Braves game. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging at my shirt sleeve. "Guess how old I'm going to be next month?" "I don't know, beauty," I said as I slipped on my glasses. "How old?" She smiled and held up 4 fingers. "It's 7:30 now. My wife and I have been up with her for almost 8 hours. She still refuses to tell us where she got them." "There's a monster under my bed," Jimmy screamed, throwing himself between his startled parents. Mommy wrapped him up while Daddy offered assurances that monsters weren't real. Jimmy pleaded with him to go make sure, so he pulled himself up and plodded down the hall. All was well until they heard a loud thumping noise followed by silence. Jimmy's mother decided to check on her husband, leaving Jimmy alone in the dark. Jimmy heard the creaks of the floor and another loud thump, then silence. Jimmy lay there hoping that his imagination was just running wild. He decided to go find out what was going on. Tiptoeing his way around the creaking floorboards, he peeked in through the keyhole to see his mother wiping the floor, and his father leaned over his bed. Jimmy opened the door slowly. His mother hopped up, hiding her hands behind her back. "Sorry," she said to him gently. "Your father slipped on a toy and tore your bed. He's sewing it back up, but I'm just cleaning up." His dad finished and walked over to him. "Why don't you sleep with us tonight, champ?" he said. As he picked him up, Jimmy fell asleep easily, safely tucked between his parents. Jimmy's parents seemed odd the next day. After dinner, they put him to bed without a word. He realized that his bed felt very lumpy and wondered if his father had re-sewn it incorrectly. He went to find his parents, but the door was locked. He banged on it, but eventually made his way back to his lumpy bed and fell asleep. He questioned his parents the next morning about the bed and the door, and his father sternly replied that he was too old to be afraid of monsters, and they would be locking him in his room at night until he had gotten over it. That night was cold, and sleep did not come quickly. Laying under his blanket, he noticed that even with the fan blowing, something was beginning to smell. He tried to ignore it, but ended up sleeping on the floor. He convinced his parents to check his bed the following morning, but they found no smell or strange lumps. For lying, his father locked Jimmy in his room for the day. Time passed slowly, and by late afternoon, Jimmy was nauseous with hunger, made worse by the potent smell coming from his bed in the afternoon heat. Determined to find the smell, he cut open the line of stitching his father had sewn. There, surrounded by stuffing, were the decaying but recognizable bodies of his parents. He began to scream at the sight of their rotting skin. He kept screaming until a knock came on the door. "Jimmy, are you okay?" came his mother's voice. Then his father's. "Remember, Jimmy, there are no monsters under the bed." In the summer of 2013, I found myself driving home alone on Highway 902 from a party. It was almost midnight, and needless to say, it was pitch black. As was usual at night, I was on the edge. I had the radio off, and I could hear nothing but the muffled roar of tires on pavement and the dull hum of the engine. I stole a glance into the middle rear view mirror and saw nothing but darkness through the back window. I know that I looked backward and saw nothing. I'm sure of it. Just the seemingly endless blackness of the night. I remember it so clearly because not 10 seconds later a car passed me to the left, headlights on. I had one of those sudden adrenaline rushes, like when you think you see a person outside your bedroom window when it's just a tree, or when you're startled awake at night with the feeling of falling. 10 seconds earlier, nothing had been behind me. Suddenly, there was a car. I drove the rest of the way home, shivering and knowing something was off. The next morning, I found 2 sets of scratches near the back of my van. One was on the left rear, and one was on the right. The car was pretty old. They could have been there for months, but that was the first time I distinctly remember seeing them. In hindsight, there are 2 possibilities for what happened that night. Possibility 1, by some glitch in reality or something paranormal, the other car somehow appeared behind me within 10 seconds of me checking my mirror, like some weird ghost crap or something. However, the second option is what makes my blood run cold whenever I consider it. It didn't even occur to me until months after the fact, but it did make me dread driving alone at night even more. Possibility 2. The car was normal. It had approached me from the rear and passed me to my left. However, something large and wide, and as black as the night, had been clinging to the rear of my car, obscuring my view through the window and leaving deep scratches on the side. And I had inadvertently driven it home with me. I sat on the bus on my way to school, listening to music and paying little to no attention to the other students. At one of the stops, my mind snapped back into reality. I looked towards the small house. Tommy's house, I thought. A hand slipped through the drapes of the window and waved the bus driver to move on. He's sick, I thought, paying no large amount of attention to the situation. The day flew by. I watched the local news channel after school, and what I heard paralyzed me. Tommy's entire family was murdered that day by an unknown suspect. After hearing this news, I moved back up to my room and quietly fell asleep. The next day, I sat on the bus. We drove past Tommy's house, and the bus driver, unaware of Tommy's family's fate, stopped at his home. As I was about to get up and explain to her what had happened, something had caught my eye. A pale hand slipped through the drapes of the window and waved the bus driver to move on. I sat on the bus, terrified. The rainy season began in early summer, and June had been no exception. It did not surprise the man when he discovered rainwater dripping from his dining room ceiling. Shrugging it off, he placed a tall pot beneath the leak and expected it to stop on its own. However, it continued to rain, and before he knew it, the pot would threaten to overflow. He had to dump the water out first thing in the morning, and straight after he returned home from work. Eventually, he began to notice water damage at the source of the leak. The white ceiling had discolored, turning a dull shade of brown. He checked the weather and realized that it would continue to rain sporadically over the next 10 days. The man was worried about the ceiling mildewing and became an expensive repair, so he would call a local handyman. Unfortunately, the man could not sign to have the repairs done, only his landlord could. It was a frustrating policy. The man called his landlord, but he couldn't reach him. He left him a few voicemails detailing how the damage was becoming progressively worse. The man was clueless as to why his landlord would not return his calls. They usually kept in touch, speaking at least twice a month. Finally, he reasoned that he would not be held accountable for any damages sustained. One night, the man was startled awake by a massive thump. He quickly turned on his bedside lamp, and just vaguely he could see an overturned table and a large shape laying across it. He sprinted out of his apartment and called the police, gagging at the smell. The man sat in the police station with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders and a coffee mug resting in his hands. He did know one thing: there had been a body in his ceiling, and the water had saturated so badly that it caved under the weight. So far, the body was unidentifiable due to the rainwater, and it was being autopsied. While the man waited, he called his landlord and finally reached him. Panicking as he explained the situation, his landlord was just as alarmed as the man, and he pleaded for him to come down to the station while he made his statement. The man paused as a detective crossed over to him, and he lowered his phone, wondering if the body had been identified. His blood ran immediately cold, and he shook his head with terror. The body belonged to Richard Thompson, his landlord, and he had died over a year ago. That's not what disturbed him the most. If his landlord was dead, then who was pretending to be him? A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the two children were already fast asleep in bed, so the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and went to watch TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs because they didn't have cable downstairs. So she called them and asked them if she could watch the cable in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the angel statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't own an angel statue." The police found both of the children and the babysitter slumped in pools of their own blood within 3 minutes of the call, and no statue had been found. I've had this weird twitch in my leg for weeks now. I researched it, and the internet said it was restless leg syndrome. Every single time I went to bed, my leg would kick as it was begging me to get up and run around. It was like my leg had more energy than my mind. It's been annoying, so I started taking potassium pills and other kind of vitamins to make it stop. Well, it's been a day since I started the vitamins, and the restless leg stopped, except now I keep waking up with bruises all over my legs. I wake up with fresh cuts too. That isn't the weird part. I'm used to waking up with random bruises. I bruise so easily. I could be sitting at my desk, get up, and somehow I bruise my arm by bumping it into my chair. These bruises I wake up with now aren't the typical bruises where I slam my leg against the wall in my sleep. I swear, these bruises look like fingers and claw scrapings down my calves. I'm starting to think that maybe there was a reason for my twitchy legs. I think, and this may sound insane, my body didn't want me to go to sleep because something is trying to take me. I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight. I can feel it again. I can feel the persuasive, crawling itch. The kind of itch everyone gets from time to time. The kind of itch that causes an instinctive scratch with no conscious thought driving the motion. Pure reflex. A dig with the fingernails and the itch is relieved. And looking at the spot after scratching shows nothing. Unblemished skin and slowly developing red streaks where the nails have been dragged. But I don't scratch. I don't scratch. I don't scratch because last week I looked at an itch just before scratching. I looked and I saw something. Something small, something black, something with legs and hairs and pincers and mandibles. And I couldn't stop the reflex. I couldn't stop my hand reaching for my leg. I couldn't stop my nails digging in. And I couldn't stop that thing from climbing in through my damaged skin, from disappearing into my flesh. I can feel the itch again. I can feel it. And this time, it's different. This time, the itch is coming from inside. We bought an old house, my boyfriend and I. He's in charge of the new construction, converting the kitchen into the master bedroom, for instance, while I'm on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it is brutal, but oddly satisfying. The best feeling is getting a long peel similar to your skin when you're peeling from a sunburn. I don't know about you, but I kinda made a game of peeling, on the hunt for the longest piece before it rips. Under a corner section of paper in every room is a person's name and date. Curiosity got me the best of me one night when I Googled one of the names and discovered the person was actually a missing person. The missing date matching the date under the wallpaper. The next day I made a list of all the names and dates. Sure enough, each name was for a missing person with a date to match. We notified the police, who naturally sent out the crime scene team. I overheard one text saying, "Yep, it's human." Human? What's human? Ma'am, where is the material you removed from the walls already? This isn't wallpaper that you're removing. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons.